Hello and welcome to this video, the second in the series of videos in which I present items from my private collection. This time we're gonna have a look and investigate this photograph from around 1870s. I think it depicts Antonio de Torres with his son, also called Antonio, and it was taken in the photograph studio of a famous guitarist as well. Now, because in this series the next videos are going to be about non-guitarists. One is about Jean-Baptiste Vuillaume, the violin maker, and another one even about Frédéric Chopin. So, of course, we guitarists, we know who is Antonio de Torres, but just a few words for those who unfortunately are not familiar with his name yet. So, Antonio de Torres was born in 1817, just 6 years after Frédéric Chopin, and he is referred to as the Stradivarius of the guitar. Well, that is correct in the sense that in the sense of prestige and skill. If you own a Torres, that's quite something, the same as a Stradivarius for a string player. But if you want to get an idea of what he actually achieved as a guitar maker in sound-wise, it's better to make a comparison to keyboard instruments. So if you think about a harpsichord, the music of Bach and Rameau and Couperin, and then you could compare it to a Baroque guitar, right? Then you continue to the fortepiano, which Mozart and Haydn had to their use, and then we come to Erard, Pleyel in England, Broadway. The pianos that Chopin, for instance, and Schumann had they could use for composing their music, right? That is, Erard is like what Torres is for guitar. And it's a funny thing that, you know, the music for harpsichord, I've heard many very convincing performances of Bach and Couperin. On piano, of course, you have to change things. But I've never heard a convincing performance of Chopin on a harpsichord. It's a bit the same for guitar. You can't imagine Tárrega's music on a Baroque guitar. It doesn't mean that the Baroque guitar isn't good, because every instrument in every period is perfect for its period music. So, words are just words, and I want to have 1 minute before we go to the photographs to listen to a fragment of a radio documentary in which I participated for the Finnish national broadcast, and we're talking just about this Baroque guitar compared to the Torres model guitar, and that says much more than a few words. So listen to that for a minute, and then we go into the photograph. Right. Niin jos katsoo sen kitaran kehitystä, niin jos barokkikitara muistaa vähän cembalo, semmoinen hyvin kirkas, ja se, niin kun sen ääni alkoi on niin hirveän räjähtämäinen, mutta sitten se jälkikaiku melkein ei ole olemassa ollenkaan. Niin estetiikka on enemmän niin myöskin tätä raskuaado-tyypistä. Se ei jäi soimaan kauhean pitkään. Sitten se on pois. Jos mä soitan tää modernilla kitaralla tai Torres-malli, niin se on eri tyyppi. Se ei oikeastaan, itse asiassa tää toimii paremmin barokkikitaralla. Eri viritys oli vanha viritys puoli askaa alempana. Tuntuu täysin erilaiselta, ihan niin kuin sormille. Ja pitää oikein vähän niin kuin sopeutua siihen. Se on hirveän kirkas, toi barokkikitara. Tässä on enemmän jotenkin pehmeämpi. Paljon pidempi soivaa. All right, here we are at the Apollo Theatre in Almeria during the Antonio de Torres Festival of June this year, and we are presenting the two pictures here. Now let's go and have a look at the three known photographs of Antonio de Torres. This is the most famous. It's a full-size portrait. All three pictures that we know are taken in older age, about 67, 68 years old. And this was taken in Barcelona while Antonio de Torres was staying in Federico Cano's house in the Cala Albacete in Gracia. And on the backdrop we have kind of a mixture of classical and Moorish Alhambra elements. Notice also the object behind his shoes here. It looks like a book or some piece of wood. At first I thought that's nice. He's bringing a kind of piece of wood. When a violinist or a guitarist is coming to the photographic studio, he takes his instrument, he takes a piece of wood. Well, but actually it turned out that's just a bit of an object for the photographer to say, don't move, stay here. You see it in many other photographs of the period as well. Okay, so then I did some research and I found, after a long time, I found a picture of the same studio with the same backdrop. And actually photographers were painters as well, especially in the early days of photography, and they would paint the backdrops himself, and you could choose as a customer what you want in the back, like a ship or a church or whatever. And Torres chose this kind of classical Alhambra Moorish style. I don't think it's a coincidence really. And this person, we don't know who it is, he chose another object, this kind of balustrade, whereas Torres chooses a chair, like maybe because he was a carpentero. You could choose all kinds of stuff, you know. I've seen pictures of objects of stuffed birds, chairs, cupboards, anything. Okay, so later on, if you went to the studio, you could choose different formats of the same photograph. You could have postcards made, like this one, made portraits. So the next one we're going to see is just this part of the photo made into a portrait. But this is a photograph, a postcard, and Antonio de Torres sends it to a guitarist he admires, Pedro González Campos. I haven't been able to find anything about him, but it's dated 1885 when he was in Barcelona. And mostly we think it's the first time he was in Barcelona, but I think we can, after this video, have a good idea that he has been there before. Okay, the other side of the card postale, we read that this guitarist Pedro González Campos, after Antonio de Torres dies, he gives this postcard to Manuel Ramirez, saying that he's, in his opinion, the only one who is good enough to follow in his footsteps. All right, let's get back to this card that I found from the Ricardo Soler, I think it was, in Gracia studio. And on the other side of this photograph is the address, Mayor 27. That's today Carrer Grande Gracia. And that's very near to where Cano was living, Federico Cano. It's like less than a kilometer, or maybe a bit more than a kilometer. So 10 minutes walk from his house. Okay, the next photograph, which is very famous as well. This is from the book of Jose Ramirez, Romanils, of course, published in 1987. And here we see the reverse side of the above photograph. It's a little bit bigger. And we see that he expanded his business, this photographer. He changed address from Mayor 50 to Mayor 50. He was in 27 before, I think. And he had another part opened in the Jongueras. That's today the Carrer de les Jongueras. That's in the old center of Barcelona. so more near to the sea. So here we have two different ones, just Mayer 27 and Mayer 50. All right, so this one is made in the Mayer 50, I think. Both of these pictures are from the Cano family album that Romanelos mentions in his book. So here's the third one. This was made in Almeria. I don't know if it's earlier or later. It's in the photo studio of Morales. And we don't know actually why his daughter Anna Torres said that he died in 1893, because he died in 1892. There's different theories about it, but let's not get into that. Okay, so now I'm going to show you the picture that I found. It was sold I bought it from a seller from Madrid, and he just put it on the internet as a carte de visite estudio fotografico La Favorita, that's it. But his posture and his whole being reminded me very strongly of Torres. Only 10 years, about 10 years younger. And the boy is about maybe 8 years. It's difficult to say, it could be 7, 9, something like that. But if you look at his shoulders, this kind of S shape, maybe one of his legs was a bit longer than the other one, you get this. And he has this kind of sad look. It's a full-size portrait, and to me he reminds me very much. A little bit healthier looking. It's the period he had his Chinese shop in Almeria, maybe his better business. Anyway, so now we have to find out in any possible way, how can we make sure that it's actually him and not just some lookalike? So let's look at different ways. You have nowadays on the internet, you can match faces. Well, this is just a free software, and you know, it's not much trusting into this, because this is actually the same person 100%. He thinks it's a match 72.6. So when I have this new portrait compared, it's 69.3. It's almost the same, and this one 71.9. So I wouldn't trust too much in this really, but I'm sure there's much better software. For instance, the police uses. So if somebody has access to that, you could try it and tell me the result. Okay, other things, the hands are quite telling as well. He has this kind of jubilant thumbs, really. And also here's a little bit stronger hand. He's of course 10 years older there. And the ears are also very telling, but unfortunately on these two portraits we don't see the same ear. Now when we turn around the card that I bought, we see the studio where it's been taken, La Favorita. Favorita was a very famous opera by Bellini, or was it Donizetti? I have to check. And guitarist made potpourris of that and fantasies. For instance, Arcas did, and Jose Ferrer did also, one for two guitars and one for solo guitar. Anyway, the address is Libertad 31, frente a la Iglesia de la Trinidad, so near the Trinidad Church. All right, I went on the internet and looked for the same studio, and I find many different ones. And we noticed that here it's Cal de Fernando number 31, Fernando 7, 31, Cal de Fernando 7, 31, 4th floor, which is clever because photographers needs to be on the top floor for the light. And here it's a Libertad 31, this is the one, and Cal de Libertad 31. Well, at first I thought it's two different addresses, but then, after a bit of research, I realized that, you know, we had the glorious revolution in Spain, which started September 1868 until 1874 in the end, or 1875. 6 years of glorious, the 6 democratic years. So they dethroned the Bourbon Queen Isabella II, and they tried to erase all symbols of the monarchy. So on January 26, 1869, the Barcelona City Council decided to change several street names, and this was one, which is for us, it's a good thing, because Cal de Fernando 7 became Cal de la Libertad after 1816, yeah. And it changed back in 1875. So, of course, as a photographer, you have printed this, in a quantity, and depending how your politic views are, you don't change right the next day. So it could be a bit flexible on the dates that he could use still older cards, even if it's changed the street name back. It depends a bit on the political sympathies of the photographer. For instance, Julian Arcas, the famous guitarist, we know that he was very much in favor of this change, because right after the revolutions he is playing in concerts a piece called Batalla de Alcolea, and the Alcolea Bridge was a fight where the revolutionaries, they made a great win, and from that they started the glorious revolution. So he was proud of that, and later after the revolution he still played this piece, Batalla, but he left the extra name of Alcolea. Okay, so this gives us a kind of a good time frame of 1869 until 1875. Now, these are 2 more cards. There's 72, there's 73. And then I found this one. And while looking at this studio, and then I realized, hey, I know this person. That looks like José Ferrer, the famous guitarist from Barcelona, living in Barcelona at that time. And he was a photographer. We know that, but we never knew which studio he had. And when I read the book La Guitarra en Catalunya by Josep Maria Mengado, it says that he lives at this address, the Libertad 31. So, Cal de Fernando 31, actually. There's a document where he states that. So that's José Ferrer. Here's other photographs of the same guitarist. He was the person making the photograph that we are researching now, which is interesting to know. There's other photographs of him. This is the one I found. This is from a very nice publication he did himself of his 12 minuets, dedicated to Francisco Tárrega. Here he is in older age, had come back from France. He lived in Paris for a while. And this one is from the Collection Fernández Rivero. That's an interesting one. I found it on the internet, but nowadays it's taken away. I can't find it anymore. I've asked for it, but I haven't heard back. It said that on the other side of this card, which we don't have now, there is musical incipits of the 12 minuets by José Ferrer. So José Ferrer was not a painter, he was a musician. So in his studios, all the photographs I've seen of his studio, there's quite a lot of them, he never has any painted backdrops, because he was a musician, not a painter. So here we have 2 photographs taken in his studio, La Favorita, and we notice the same floor, carpet actually. So now we have the place, the name of the photographer, and the timeline of roughly 69 to 75. The place is nowadays quite near the Palau de la Música, which wasn't built in that area yet. And notice again the object behind the shoes. There he has it. So you want to have the camera making a sharp picture, and if the person moves, then and here's the drop here behind his shoes. José Ferrer was preparing to move to Paris in 1885. He had come into an inheritance of his father. He probably had sold his studio already. And because he lives in 1884 in another address, and that address is on the first floor, so he probably quit his photographic business and preparing to move to Paris. So that might be the reason that when Torres, if this is Torres, when he came back to Barcelona in 1884, he went to another photographic studio and not to José Ferrer's photographic studio, because it wasn't existing anymore, and also because he lived in another part of town. So now we have to think about why would Torres travel to Barcelona in 1869 or 1875 or anything in between. It's quite a long trip all the way from the south to the north, and Almería didn't even have a train at that moment, so he had to go with the vapor, which is a steamboat, and it's quite a trip. If it's 69, we know only of one guitar he made in 1869, but in 68 he made a lot of them. So it might be that he went to Barcelona to sell guitars to the guitar circles there. And on the other side of the timeline, from 1875, he started making guitars again, of course. He made about 5 to 6 instruments a year. And in the 80s, productions goes up, much more guitars every year. We're going to look at the Barcelona's newspapers later for this period of 69 to 75, which corresponds, of course, with the period that he took a break from guitar making and started the China shop in Almería, which has to do with the revolution, I'm sure. We come back to that later. So, about the relationship of Ferrer and Torres, we have 2 interesting documents next to this photograph, of course. One is from La Guitarra en Catalunya, again, the same book by Josep Maria Mangaro. And it's about this, the top one. It's a text from a newspaper from 29 July of 1884. If I translate it, last night at the academy directed by the Sempan ladies, a guitar concert was held in honor of their respective husband and father. The performance was given by the esteemed builder of said instrument, Mr. Torres, the distinguished professor of the same, Mr. Ferrer, and another notable figure, bringing honor and glory to the divine Spanish art. And then it continues, and later on it says, the great number of distinguished families in attendance were exceedingly pleased with such a delightful evening. Well, that's confusing. You can read it in the way that Torres was playing guitar, or he was just presenting his instruments, and Mr. Ferrer with another notable figure that this reporter doesn't remember his name. Mr. Ferrer played guitar duets with somebody else, and Torres just showed his instruments. This is from 29th of July 1884. We come back to that. And the other one, the lower one, the handwritten one, is from José Ferrer's Method, which was never published. But it's interesting to have a look at it. You can find it on the internet easily. He never managed to publish it. It's very, it's many pages, more than 200, I think. So, but it's interesting to read. He's talking about guitar makers. Here, between the modern, we can name many of them, but we'll name some of them. So, González from Madrid, Altimira from Barcelona, Ribot y Alcañiz, also from Barcelona, Torres from Sevilla. He established himself later in Almeria. Arias from the Ciudad Real in Madrid. And, this is interesting, Martin from New York. The guitars from this last one, even if they have a very nice voices, they tend to be stiff. That's how I understand it. And because of that, it's hard to play them. On the other hand, those of Torres and Arias, at the same time they have an excellent voice sound, and they have a very good diapason, so it's about tuning, and they have a very good easy execution of it's very easy to play them, extraordinarily easy. That's interesting. So these are the things that we know about them, their relationship. Now to finish this part off, before we check out on the photograph again, let's have a look at this video. Does it work? This is the place where the photo was taken. The fourth floor right up there, because of the light, is the Carrer de Ferran, and it's right in front of the church, as he says on his cards. That's the church. So that's where Jose Ferrer lived, up there, and where the photograph that I am presenting here now was taken. Okay, now let's have a look at the boy. Torres had two sons. The first one was Teodoro Jose Julian de la Santísima Trinidad Torres Martin. Wow, great name. He was born on the 9th of November 1860. That would make him in 1869, the earliest date this photograph could have been taken, 9 years old. So in 1875 he would be 15, that's too old. So it could be him, if it is. And his other son, Antonio de Padua Julian de la Santísima Trinidad Torres Martin, was born on the 9th of January in 1868. So in 1869 he would be 1, but in 1875, because he was born in the beginning of the year, he would be 7 years, which is entirely possible. And notice that both boys have in their name Julian, also as one of the names. That's probably because Julian Arcas was a good friend, and even his best man, according to tradition, on his wedding. So do we have other photos of the sons? That would be good, of course. Well, I have found only one, which doesn't help that much. This is Antonio Torres, the youngest son. He published a book of verses, Humoradas. I haven't been able to find any exemplar of that, but this is from Romanillus's book. And well, doesn't help that much. They have kind of flappy ears, yes. Could be, but impossible to say. So why would Torres again come to Barcelona in that period? And could we possibly find something about it in the newspapers? There's not that much about Torres. In general, he generally stayed quite under the radar. He was really modest. He didn't make, as far as we know, any ads in the newspapers. But we have two interesting occasions. Let's have a look at those. This is from before the period we are investigating. It's from the finefretted.com page by Randy Osborne. There's lots of interesting things on his pages. Do check it out. Here it says, the translation, the famous guitar maker Antonio de Torres from Sevilla has arrived to our area. Blah, 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 blah. They really appreciates this also, again, giving Mr. Torres as more of any soundboard an airy soundboard shape, so the doming of the soundboard, that is well proportioned, giving his guitar the sonority of a piano and the most exquisite tuning. La más exquisita afinación. They're talking about tuning again, and later on again. And that's interesting because when I got my Torres guitar, the SA30 La Perla, I was wondering about it because we have always, well, this is a bit side thing on the subject, but there's two things going on: the string, the pitch the string wants to make, and then the pitch the top, is functioning. So there, the lighter the guitar, the more the top is winning. So if it's like you play in A440, but the top just moves better in 42, and it just changes the pitch up in this case. And Torres guitars does it really very strongly. So actually the tuning is done by the top. When you play chords, then they're just fitting very nicely. You don't have to do it with your fingers like a violin player would do in playing chords. Anyway, that's a different. I just noticed this. The aficionados can admire some of what he has brought. So that's interesting. He went to Madrid in '65, and we know that he made a lot of guitars. We know of 12 guitars made in '64. So if you look at the listing of Torres guitars, a website by John Ray, the great guitar maker from Granada, he keeps a list which is updated regularly, because the book of Romanillos is reprinted. Well, if you can still get it, anyway, it's not updated in that sense, which is a pity in a way. But anytime a new Torres guitar comes to light, you can check John Ray's list. Of the year '65, we have only one Torres guitar, but it doesn't mean that he didn't make more. So in '64 he made lots of guitars, and he went to Madrid with guitars trying to sell them. That's interesting, in '65. And then he did kind of the same in '84. This is from a newspaper, 24th of July 1884, the same period, same time when this photograph was taken, approximately. And then it says, in this city there is Antonio de Torres, a distinguido fabricante de guitarras. And it's talking about a reunion of various invited guitarists. So, of course, guitarists nowadays still, I think in those days as well, everybody knew each other. And they were all friendly with each other, mostly. And that's probably the reason why Torres didn't need to make any ads, because it goes from mouth to mouth. So, but there is a reunion of various invited guitarists and other artists and competent persons. So it was not a concert, and he had some of his guitars to show. And again in '82 and '83 his production went up. He made much more guitars than before. So, this is from 29th of July 1875. So that is the period we are interested in for this photograph. And it's about the relation of Ferrer and Torres. And this was made 5 days after Torres had arrived in Barcelona. So it says, this night we have, well, that's the one I already told you about. This is in the Sempan family, where we have a concert with guitar. So actually, when Ferrer and Torres went to this evening and presented the guitar and had concert, and it's 5 days after Torres had arrived in Barcelona. So if this is the first time Torres went to Barcelona it's quite unusual to think that they wouldn't have known each other earlier on. So you don't go to a party which was prepared for probably much more in advance. You invite guests and make sure the program is fine. Of course, Ferrer was living in Barcelona, so they would invite Ferrer, but Ferrer wouldn't bring Torres if he hadn't known him as a person before. Only 5 days is not too much, you know? So I think it suggests that they actually already knew each other from before. Okay, let's now look at what the Diario de Barcelona says from anything about related to guitar from 1869 to 1875. Well, this is a thesis by Maria del Mar Poyatos Anjudar, and she rechecked all the data from the Romanillos book and found quite a lot more things, because nowadays more and more these magazines and everything is being digitalized. It's easier to find, but she went to all the archives as well personally. So this is an interesting read for anybody interested. You can find it on the internet easily. But she doesn't say anything related to Barcelona of this period that we are interested in. She hasn't found anything. So I thought I'm going to have to look by hand, actually. Because, well, all the search engines work fine on these pages. But I noticed when I open the PDF, actually, then, and I search with my own computer search thing, it finds different things. So if you're in a general search on these pages, then you find certain things, but it's not exactly the same always. So I decided to do it hand. I opened every paper and searched on the PDF, and I find some interesting things really that haven't been, as far as I know, noticed before. For instance, this one from 26 January 1869, written by Farkas y Soler, the famous music critic. This is in the Diario de Barcelona. That's the main paper from that period, and that one I researched, every one of them. In 1868 and 1869, there's lots of concerts by Arcas while he was living in Barcelona. Also concerts with Manuel, his brother, and concerts by other guitarists, as José Fiñas. This is like a 2-page, it's not everything, 2-pages critic about his concert, very positive, but one part of it is interesting here. You see, he played a piece, original piece of the Género Sinfónico with the title Mi Segunda Época. Well, since the book of Romanillos, we always refer to the second epoch. That's from 1975, after both artists, Torres and Arcas, had been kind of in retreat in Almeria, and Arcas started the shop of petroleum and other stuff, and Torres started his China shop in Almeria, and in 1875 they started their second period. So Torres starts writing on his labels Segunda Época, and Arcas composed this piece. But now it turns out that actually he composed it before his retirement back to Almeria. That's interesting. It changes the whole idea actually of this second epoch. This is, so far that we know, the only time he played this in a concert. I haven't found other ones. It doesn't mean he didn't play it, but for instance, after the Barcelona concerts, he went to Valencia, and after that Arcas went to Malaga, and he was very popular there. He played 7 concerts in like 20 days. And in the biography of Arcas by Javier Suárez Pajares and Eusebio Rioja Vázquez, it states that he puts all his program there. So he played 35 pieces in 7 concerts. Only in the last concert he repeated several pieces. But there's not the Mi Seconda Epoca piece. Of this piece there's another manuscript with a dedication by Arcas. It's kept in the family of the Canos. So if one artist, respected artist, gives as a gift to another, to Cano, and he gives this piece, that means he's proud of it. But why didn't he play it much more in concerts? We don't know. Anyway, it starts to wonder, what does this title mean, Mi Seconda Epoca, if it doesn't refer to his comeback with the guitar? What does it mean then? I mean, it's January 69. And also, what does it mean for Torres using in his labels Second Epoch, if they didn't do it together at the same time? For Torres, you have to remember he started building guitars again after 5 years of not making guitars. And he wanted to number his guitars. So just writing in guitar number 1 is a bit strange after you've made already 150 guitars approximately. So that's probably why he wrote in, I say, Secunda Epoca. And maybe he was inspired by the piece that Arcas probably had played for him, if he was proud of it. Okay, wouldn't it be great, by the way, if Torres, while he had his china shop, he had to do with bookkeeping, of course, and so with that experience, when starting making guitars, maybe he kept a little book with guitar 1 sold to this and that person, guitar number 30 sold to Pedro Aguilera, which we know, that's the guitar I own. Guitar number 49 goes to Francisco Tárrega with how much everybody paid. And you don't know, maybe one day we will find something like that. That will be wonderful to see all the names. You never know. Okay. In the biography of Arcas, the writers are wondering why was this Mi Seconda Epoca by Arcas when it was published in the 90s after Arcas had died already. Why is it dedicated to José Broca? It's a bit weird because he is like the grand old man of the Barcelona scene, right? And if you're starting a new epoca, and you're not even living in Barcelona at that period, why would he dedicate it to him? But now it makes much more sense because he was living in Barcelona when he composed this, the end of 68 probably. José Broca was the grand old man, so to say. His students, they were José Ferrer, Philip Pedrell, Miguel Masbargalo, of which I have some interesting manuscripts that I will present later in another video. Domingo Bonet, so the whole scene was kind of circling around him. So it makes sense to dedicate a piece you're really proud of to him. Now, but what does it mean, Mi Seconda Epoca? Let's check it out. What I think, it refers much more to his compositional style, actually. So in this piece, this is the only piece we know that he's using this kind of contrapunto style techniques. So here it says contrapunto. After the introduction I showed in the last picture, we have like 3 voices, at times 4 voices going, and here it says, and it continues like the whole page. So on the sopran, and then the bass continues, and then he swaps the voices later on in the piece. So el contrapunto trocado, like swapping the voices. and it continues a long thing. So that's quite a feat, actually, to be able to write this texture and change the voices like that in a quite guitaristic and natural way, really. Of course, Bach, he would do it just with his left hand and his eyes closed, no problem. But for a guitarist, it's not so usual. And then he uses other techniques as well, like inversion of musical gestures, and it's quite interesting, actually. So I think that's the reason why I named this piece the way he named it. It's a new period in his compositional style, but he didn't follow up that much after it. Okay, let's continue. We have to get back to the photograph. So, but this is kind of the ambience in those years in Barcelona. Here's another thing I found in the newspapers of that period. Actually, after Arcas leaves for Valencia in March 69, it actually starts to become really quiet on the front of guitar in Barcelona. In 1870, there's almost nothing. I could find Broca that he had a change of address and put an advertisement that, yes, I'm still teaching, so he would need students. And then in June and August, there are several concerts of Antonio Cano. And this one is from August 1. And the last concert that Cano announced in the papers is on the 15th of August. And then there's nothing new for the rest of the year. And in 1871 and 72, it's really poor. There's only 2 concerts for the benefit of Manuel Arcas. It means that he made a concert for his own benefit twice. He needed money. So for artists in that period, it was not that well. And then there's some things in the paper about guitar and bandurria orchestras, but that's not professional guitarists, really. And in 1873, concerning guitar, there's nothing at all in the papers. And I opened every one of them. It was published every day, twice a day, morning and evening, except Sunday and Monday. So that was quite a lot of papers. If you're interested in the things I found there is some interesting stuff from the beginning of that period and the end of the period, when things get better for artists. Some interesting things. I put a link with all the material I found from the years 68 to 76 from the Diario de Barcelona. Anyway, this one we are looking at here, it's about Antonio Cano. It says something about this period as well. He was a pensioner. He had gotten a pension of an individu of the royal family of Spain. Well, the royal family was not that popular anymore at that period, so he was living in retirement. But because of the revolution of September, his conditions changed, so he had to get back to a public life, meaning he had to do concerts just to make money. He didn't have income anymore. But this journalist said, "Hey, wow, that's good for us. We can hear his artistry. Very nice." Okay, this is one of 1874, and then the whole musical scene is slowly reviving. After 73, there was nothing, and now in March 7 of 1874, we get this music is being published again, guitar music. It says, "A musical college in this city writes, we have seen 2 elegant and lovely guitar pieces titled Recuerdos de Montecri and Cuejas de mi Lira, composed by the distinguished guitarist Don José Ferrer y Esteve. His music is pleasuring and idiomatic to the guitar. Having been created for the instrument, it's perfectly suited to its capabilities, making these works a fine acquisition," which means a purchase, "for enthusiasts." And this is interesting now. It is gratifying to see that in these times, when the guitar has been so neglected and has fallen into such a state of decline, there are still enthusiasts who rescue its beauties from oblivion and keep alive the interest in the instrument that was first awakened at the beginning of this century. So, not too much things start to happen again, but slowly for the rest of the year. And also 1875, well, it's getting more active. So in 1875 I found concerts by José Viñas. I put them in the map. You can find it on the link. And there are also some other guitarists. Other signs of revival are that there are 39 guitar cases were brought by Vapor, that's a steamship, from Valencia to Barcelona. So if you need guitar cases, it means guitars are being sold. And music was published, etc., etc. So now this is, I think, very interesting thing. It's from 12 July 1875 from the Crónica de Catalunya. It says, at a private gathering of guitarists. Well, that means, again, it's not a concert, because in concerts they always put a program, who is playing, where, when. And if you're lucky, after the concerts you get a review by a music critic. And it's always known the who is playing, where, and what. This is not a concert, it's a private gathering again, like the ones we've seen before in 65 and 84, where Torres was present. Okay, private gathering of guitarists. We had the pleasure of listening to Professor Ferrer and Mr. Alegre. Well, Magin Alegre was the teacher of Miguel Lobet later on, who performed several pieces by Maestro Broca, who, he was present, despite his state of health, also agreed to perform some remarkable compositions. So Broca was there. He had had a stroke about 4 or 5 years earlier, but he was still in a little bit state of health, and they persuaded him to play. So that's not like a concert really, where the program is fixed. And it continues, all those who attended the evening, and among them were many enthusiasts, aficionados, there again all the guitarists, could be convinced of the qualities that adorn the aforementioned guitar professors, especially their good taste and clean executions which they demonstrated in the difficult pieces they performed. So, that wasn't a concert, there was no program, and of course it could have been possible that this is the gathering where Torres came with his guitars that he started making in 75 again, and that would be the reason for him to come to Barcelona to get new commissions. Of course, his name is not mentioned here, but if the person who invited the press for this private gathering, that probably was Ferrer. Well, so the person writing this in the newspaper, if he only knew Ferrer by name, and there's many other people he wouldn't remember. When he comes home, he wouldn't remember all these people. Especially when Torres, his name wasn't all that famous at that moment, really. Of course, his instruments were known among guitarists, because Arcas brothers were playing, the Cano family was playing his guitars, and the guitarists would know, and they would tell Torres that, yeah, there is lots of interest here for your guitars. You could sell and have new orders if you come here. I'm going to show this, which shows that actually Torres's name wasn't, for the newspaper in Barcelona, couldn't have been much known to the people there, because this is a newspaper from Almeria, from later, even 1879, when Torres was making like 5-6 guitars a year already. The 4th of June, Almeria, the Crónica Meridional. It's from Maria del Mar Boyatos Anjudar, she found this. It's a funny piece. It's much longer than this, it's a whole page. So I just took out parts of it. And it's for the Antonia's Names Day. And it says, let's greet all the Antonios, sons of this beautiful land. And then he mentions all the Antonios that are known in the city of Almeria. Well, not all, but many of them. And from here, I'll start with Don Antonio Torrecilla, serious of face and a homeopathic teacher whose modern system cures illnesses with globules and fresh water. Kind of funny. I won't forget Antonio Martinez Estrada, who is a sly old fox, nor Antonio Orludo, who is a man who talks more than a tooth puller and is an intelligent expert. So he's making fun of all the Antonios in a way. When he comes to Antonio Torres, who had his Chinese shop, it says, a Antonio Torres que vende platos, fuentos y soperas que me envía una dama Juana rebosando dulce néctar. It means, to Antonio Torres, who sells plates, serving dishes, and soup tureens. So that's China. Have him send me a demijohn, which is a kind of a bottle, overflowing with sweet nectar. Right, that's alcohol and wine. Well, that probably doesn't mean that he was selling alcohol as well. Anyway, it doesn't mention him as a guitar maker, even if he was a guitar maker at that time. He was having a shop and making guitars. They remember him as a shopkeeper, not as a guitar maker. So how could anybody in Barcelona, if he just goes to some gathering of guitarists, remember all those names? All right, so to finish up, here we have all the photos together, and my hypothesis is that Torres wanted to start again, or had started in 1875, his second period, making guitars. Barcelona, of course, was reviving, and there are lots of guitarists that knew about him. It's kind of the center for guitar, growing into that. And he would go there, bring guitars, and try to get new commissions. He would know Ferrer, maybe even stay in his house, who knows, and had his portrait taken there. He would take his son. Why not? To show him the world, making life more easy for his wife, who stayed for several weeks in Almeria running the shop. It would be nice if somebody who's been looking at this video could go and check out this music magazine. It would be nice if we could find more info about this, especially about this gathering of guitarists that I just presented. It might have been that there's been written about it in the La España Musical, that is the magazine for music, which was published in 1866 to 1877. But unfortunately, these years, only 66 and 67, if I remember correctly, are digitalized. And the year that I'm interested in, 75, can't be found online now. You have to go there and look at it in the archives or at the film of it. Anyway, if somebody has time and lives in Barcelona, go there, you go check it out. This private gathering of guitarists. Of course, this hypothesis that this is Torres, it could be, of course, that's just a person who looks like him. He's at the same age of him at the period this photo was taken. He happens to have a son of the same age as Torres has. He happens to go to a guitarist photographer and have his photo taken, and that's it. So we would, to be 100% sure, we would need a bit more information, because it's easy to make mistakes like this second epoch idea that Arcas composed it in 1875, which is a very logical way of thinking, of course. But when now we have more information, it turns out it wasn't like that. So it could happen with this photograph as well. These are the two photos I've been presenting now in this video series. And this is a digital restoration made by Adrian Rius. He's an expert on Tárrega, great person. He has made a biography of Tárrega, of course, and he's busy publishing a new critical edition of Tárrega's compositions and arrangements, which is really interesting. One book has been published now, and it's really highly due because I've been waiting for this. He has so many new arrangements, manuscripts to compare, and we really need this. Actually, I have 2 manuscripts by Tárrega also of arrangements that might be included in those. So I realized that presenting this kind of material in a YouTube video is maybe not ideal, and maybe it should be in an academic article. So, but for myself personally, it feels more natural to do it in the video. I'm not really keen on writing academic writing, but if there's anybody who's interested in doing that and wants to do that, I'm more than glad to help to write an article about this. Next video is going to be about the violin maker or string instruments maker Jean-Baptiste Vuillaume, who is called the French Stradivarius. He made violins for Paganini, made restorations to his violins as well, and it's kind of the same situation as with Torres. We only have about 3 pictures of him in his old age, and the one I found, well, he's also in his old age, but it's a quite interesting one. He's standing with a violin in his hand, and very relaxed photograph. So that's it for this time. See you in the next video. Ciao.